Breaking tonight, former Speaker of the House and Republican candidate himself for President Newt Gingrich is making waves with his outspoken appreciation for how Republican candidate Donald Trump is shaking up the GOP. One panelist in our Frank Luntz focus group summed up what the Republican frontrunner has been able to do in very simple terms.
So let's start with a word or phrase to describe Donald Trump.
He says what we're all thinking. It's emotionally attractive, but it's somewhat erratic.
He's decisive. He knows what he wants, what he doesn't want, and what the country needs.
Anti-establishment, real change.
He relates to the people.
Everything he said, he's done.
He seems to tell it like it is, and he's not beholden to the special interests.
He's bold and truthful.
He's been building a very successful brand for the last 20 years.
Joining me now, author of the new political thriller, Duplicity, former House Speaker and Fox News contributor, Newt Gingrich. Mr. Speaker, good to have you with us tonight.
It's great to be with you.
You have said Donald Trump could be a, quote, big asset for the GOP. Right now, a lot of folks think he's sort of a headache for them. So how does he turn that around?
First of all, if you're the other candidates, he's a big headache. Yeah. And if you're a donor or a supporter of the other candidates, he's a big headache. But look at the size of the debates. Mm-hmm. I mean, we have many, many more people watching the Republican debates than watching the Democrats. Look at the size of the crowds he's drawing, and look at who's showing up. He is reaching high school graduates who are workers at a level of maybe no Republican, including Reagan, in that they identify with him, they show up for him, and he gets huge crowds. I'm not for or against Trump. I think Trump's a remarkable figure. I have a lot of friends in this race, and I admire all of them for having the courage to run. But I do think you have to, at some point, say, as the poll tonight showed, you have a guy who's consistently at 39, consistently ahead. Sometimes he's ahead of the next 3 people combined. Mm-hmm. You have to at least try to figure out what's the phenomena here, what's going on, because the American public is allowed to pick somebody that the Washington elites may not understand. Mm-hmm. And the job is for the Washington elites to understand the country, not for the country to give in to the Washington elites.
Yeah, and you heard from the group there. They had some really strong emotions connected to him, and several of them said they want to feel safe. That's the reason they like him. He does talk tough. That's something, that's sort of the lane that we thought Governor Christie, before this race got started, if he got in, that would be sort of his place in this race, would to be. And he started out on his tour calling it, telling it like it is. I mean, he does talk tough. Right. But is he sort of being out-Christied by Trump?
Well, I mean, we'll see. We don't know how the dance is going to end yet. Mm-hmm. But at least at this moment, Trump is a phenomenon unlike anything we've seen in modern times. I mean, you'd have to go back and either look at Theodore Roosevelt or at Andrew Jackson to have some sense of the scale of this thing. When you have somebody who is at 39% without any TV advertising. Mm-hmm.
But he would argue, and the other candidates would argue, he gets tons of free TV advertising because every time he does something, it's all over the place.
Look, I just watched Frank go down this list of people, every single one of whom said something positive. That could have been a commercial.
Yeah.
And so all I'm saying is there is something happening there that is very real, and particularly the Republicans in this city, whether they're the staff, the elected members, or they're the lobbyists, they had all better take a serious look at this, because it's not about Trump. It's about millions of Americans who've decided that they don't want anybody with traditional experience. Mm-hmm. They want to take a gamble on somebody new, and you heard it tonight. These folks are prepared to gamble on somebody who they all recognize has no traditional experience, and that's part of what makes him attractive to them, because they think the traditional experience means you can't get the job done.
Long term, is he good or bad for the party? Because critics will say he's not a true conservative. When you look at social issues, fiscal issues, he's been all over the place to arrive at where he is now. But they say, you know, if the party's going to be about true conservatism and traditional Republican, you know, policies, that he doesn't really, over the long term, seem committed to a core set of principles that conservatives would say mirror them.
Well, look, I think that's probably a legitimate complaint, and certainly, as Rush Limbaugh has been saying, you know, Ted Cruz is a more traditional conservative. And again, depending on what you mean by conservative. I mean, John Kasich balanced the federal budget for 4 straight years. Chris Christie was a great prosecutor, a very tough guy, did a lot of reforms in New Jersey. Jeb Bush was a very innovative governor. I mean, I think he's had, in a way, the toughest deal of anybody out there. So you can go right down there and look at him, and there are a lot of solid people. Trump isn't a traditional conservative. People need to get this in their head. If you go back and you look at Theodore Roosevelt and you go back and you look at Andrew Jackson, these are people who broke the mold. And I suspect if Trump ends up governing the country, leading the country, every morning will be wild and woolly. You will have the most extraordinary job in the country because you'll be getting up every day thinking, what is he doing now?
Yeah, break the mold. I mean, he'd like implode and blow up every single mold we've ever seen so far. But it's made for a very interesting race, and we still have months to go.
He's doing pretty darn well so far.
Mr. Speaker, great to have you in.
Good to be with you.
Thanks for coming on.